As I've been preparing for these, and also as people have been meeting in small groups and sharing last week in particular, and this week, I think work with this next week as well. This issue of our nervous system and the nervous systems of other people is so integral to our life, our relationships. It's really quite a deep process to look at. How much of our relationship is due to someone's nervous system and how much is who they actually are. And when we have longer term relationships with people, we have opportunities to hang out with them and connect with them when they're grounded and steady. We most likely also are around them when they're dysregulated. And someone else's nervous system dysregulation, being in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, also activates our nervous system. And so part of what we're doing here, and the reason I bring it up at the beginning, is that nobody has a perfectly regulated nervous system. Some people are more grounded than others. Some people are more anxious. This changes over time. I wanted to start this exploration with this acknowledgement that we all have nervous systems that don't always work very well in our world today. We're often under stress, and when we are, we go into these survival responses. So to keep an open heart as we're working, and to keep that in mind, what's due to someone's nervous system, and how is that impacting us? Our brains are different. Some people have a very logical, musical, mathematical kind of brain. They understand math easily. Other people don't get math at all. It's not how their brain works. And when my son was graduating from university as a musician, he got a job with a computer company. And one of the reasons the boss said was that he found that people who were musicians have the kind of brain that understands computer programming, which was certainly true for him. And so we have all of these differences in our brain. And then we also have neurodiversity. We have people with ADHD. There's some kind of chemical imbalance. They have a lot more depression. It's harder for them to stay regulated or happy. We have people who've been in accidents. Certainly we have childhood developmental trauma and trauma that happens in utero as well. Stress, inflammation, all of these things affect our brain. So those are longer term things. And then we also have these shorter term things, like if somebody does drugs, or when you drink, your brain functions differently. You eat a lot of sugar, your brain functions differently. If you're around somebody who's really anxious, which is what we're working with this couple of weeks, our brain functions differently because our nervous systems are activated in a different way. These are things that we could remember. It's part of the context. We have this unconscious process, this neuroception. We take things in through our senses. We talk about this quite a bit and work with this in our daily practice because we scan for visual cues. The brain is always scanning for danger, but we can also scan for cues of safety. Sounds come in. If it's something that's unusual or seems like it might be a problem, our brain will start to pay attention to it. Otherwise, it kind of moves to the background. Same with scents or aromas. We have associations with everything, which is how our nervous system protects us. However, it has a negativity bias, and a lot of the things that were actually dangerous for us as a child are not any longer, or they're not as threatening as when we were a child. We all have a lot of commonality in this. We don't like to be left out. We don't like to have someone point their finger at us and show contempt. We don't like to be around people who are activated while they're driving and might be coming up too close behind us. We feel unsafe. So whenever we're activated into that, our nervous system is going to respond in some way. We are going to be activated into fight, flight, freeze, fawn as well. Our nervous systems are always communicating. And a lot of that is not in words. A lot of that is, how do I feel? What's going on with my breath? When we feel safe and secure, our body relaxes, our breath is easier. But a lot of us have trouble reaching that feeling of safety because our nervous systems have an ongoing assessment of danger and we're in a hypervigilance. Last week, and when we were looking at anxiety, talking people who have a lot of discharging that happens verbally, whether that's us or whether that's somebody who does that around us, we were looking at what it costs us to be around someone whose nervous system is dysregulated. It could be someone we really care about. It could be we're in relationship all the time with people with unregulated nervous systems, including our own. And understanding a bit of the context of that, I think, can help. We don't want to punish someone for having a dysregulated nervous system. What's going on in our nervous system is not something that we have complete control over. We want to be able to keep an open heart at the same time as we're really looking at this with open eyes. What is the truth? What does it do to me to be around this? What can I do to work with my own nervous system? This is the polyvagal theory, the autonomic ladder. We're working with dorsal vagal, that feeling of overwhelm, shut down, freeze. I can't cope. And it's a very still, not in a sense of wonderful stillness in the mind, but a shutdown state. In order to come out of that, we have to kind of come up into some kind of activation. Often that's through fight or flight. So if we are in a situation that our nervous system assesses as dangerous, we'll come up into fight or flight. If those don't work, we might go down into freeze. But ideally, we'll use the tools and the practices we have to strengthen our nervous system, have more regulation in our nervous system, and then come into ventral vagal, which is trust, connection, grounded. Let's do an inquiry. We only have access to compassion when we're in a state of trust in ventral vagal, when we're emotionally regulated. So let's just do something to kind of settle ourselves. There's a lot of words in the air right now. Take a breath, relax your body, and notice that your body's here. You might hold your own hands. There's ways that we can connect with our body and feel that we're safe. You could look around the room. Let's do 3 or 4 breaths of cyclic sighing just as a reset. So that's a deep double inhale through the nose and a long, slow exhale like you're breathing out through a thin straw. So breathe out through your mouth. And as you breathe out, let your shoulders soften, let your body settle. So 3 or 4 deep breaths. One more. So we're starting from being a little bit more grounded. We can always do any of these practices in the middle as well. If you were to bring to mind somebody that you want to work around this relationship, maybe you feel like you're not very happy with how it's going. Maybe you're thinking about some different boundaries with them. Maybe there's a conversation you need to have with them. So let's look first to see, are they in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn? What is going on in their nervous system that causes you to have a reaction to that or be activated? So someone who's in a fight response might be causing harm. They might be showing you contempt. They might be out of control. We generally feel like we have to protect ourselves from someone who's in a fight response or someone who is regularly in a fight response. We might not be able to fully relax because we don't know when they're going to go off. So that might be what's going on with that person. They might be in a fight response. They might be in a flight or freeze response, which makes it frustrating. You can't really connect with them. It's hard to attach with somebody and connect with someone if they're not really here. And again, that's another nervous system and a trauma response. Because if somebody is feeling shut down, they might be dissociated, really disconnected, then they're not really available to us. So let's sit with that for a moment. Whatever person that you're going to work with. It doesn't have to be a person who's a 10 out of 10 for you, although you could if you wanted. Continue to notice your body, your breath, and what does that bring up in your nervous system when you're thinking about them? And then we could also notice, okay, that is the impact that I'm having. I'm feeling like I need to withdraw or protect. And we could also look at that in terms of how great of a threat is it in the moment? How many other experiences do you have with this person? Is this something that they do every single time? Is it something that happens very rarely? Is it kind of common? What is your actual situation right now when you're thinking about them? Also, right now, we're not in their presence. We're thinking about this. We're doing an inquiry. Right now, there's actually no chance that they're going to yell at you or shut down on you. Let yourself notice that. We respond to everything. And only if we're shut down do we not. Nobody wants to live a life where we're just shut down, we're dull, we're numb. This is how we evolved. We evolved in these small family groups. Historically, if a person was on their own, they could not survive. You couldn't get shelter and food, and you couldn't physically survive, but also emotionally. So we really have a lot of history that's built right into our nervous system that we need other people. And we also pay a cost to be around people who are maybe not treating us well. Maybe we betray ourselves. We're not really on our own side. We're fawning to be included. So let's take a look at what is in our best interest now. Just notice briefly what comes to mind when you think about that person. Is this somebody that you could reach out to a lot of the time? Is this someone who you feel like you need to protect yourself from? Because a lot of this depends on what was helpful for us when we were children. This is a few statements from Dr. Kay Vouch. She's a psychologist that I used to work with. And she says, in a healthy relationship, both people act like adults. And the reality of both individuals is equally honored. They take equal responsibility for their emotional reactions and talk things out rather than acting things out. And I do see some of this in relationships that I'm involved with, friends and different people. And it also feels like that's not that common. Both people act like adults. A lot of the people that we're looking at needing protection from or setting boundaries around are people who are too dysregulated to really be in touch with their adult self. So we need to manage our own anxiety and our own nervous system regulation so that we can act like, I need to tell you my truth. I can do it with kindness. I can do it with compassion. And I'm not going to just avoid it. I'm going to actually engage honestly in this relationship. So I wanted to acknowledge how hard that is. There's several inquiry statements here. So we're going to go into the inquiry now. And feel free to adjust the language as you're doing the inquiry statements. These are some examples of what you might say just as a starting place. I find myself feeling anxious, or maybe you feel angry or you're frustrated, whatever emotion you feel, you could insert that. I feel myself feeling anxious when you monologue and go on and on about something that upsets you. I'm bringing this forward. I want to talk about this with you because it happens a lot and I want to share, but you're hard to interrupt. Notice your breath. Let yourself be here. Bring that person to mind if you wanted, or you could imagine you're both sitting maybe in chairs facing each other or something. What would the feel like if you were to say something like this? So this is for someone who talks a lot and doesn't really pay attention to us. Or it might be something more like, I don't feel like there's room for me in this relationship. And this is a longer term pattern. In some relationships, they talk all the time and they don't seem to really know us. I know a lot about you, but you don't seem interested in getting to know me. And then the other part of that is sometimes I don't mind, and other times I don't have the capacity to hold that for you. It's not a good time, but you don't even seem to notice that. And this is what happens often when we're really dysregulated or anxious or in some kind of a survival response is we don't really see the other person. And it feels really difficult to be on the receiving end of that. If that's something that you feel about this relationship that you're working with, notice what comes up around that for you. Keep staying in your body, keep coming back to being regulated. You might share with somebody what you're learning about the nervous system and fight, flight, freeze, fawn. That would help to normalize the patterns that people are in. We're not saying someone's a bad person. We're saying we're noticing that there's a lot of nervous system dysregulation going on. And this is a big one. Lately, you might need more reassurance than I can give you. I'm really working in my own body and my own nervous system so that I'm not so reactive when you're anxious. And what is something that you could do? Like if you could recognize that this is difficult for me to be around you because of the level of anxiety that you have, or that you seem to be in a fight, flight, or freeze. What could you do to reduce your anxiety, to build up your nervous system and maybe get some support from other people? Oftentimes when we're really needing support, we just look to the people around us and we're not really sensitive to the equality of the relationship, or is this a good time? So sometimes we have to say something very strong like this isn't working for me. I can't be the person that you always turn to and discharge in this way. This isn't working. So what are we going to do? Is there somebody else who could support you? Could you do some nervous system regulating to lower the level of hypervigilance, the level of anxiety? This is not an easy thing, and yet it might be the kindest thing that we could say for both of us, but also it's a true thing. So I'm working on my own, and what could you do? What does that feel like as you might imagine setting that kind of a boundary? I'm going to work with mine. I'm going to stay connected with you, and I really need you to do something to lower that level. And the unspoken part of that is if it continues to not work for me, if you continue to be this dysregulated, this demanding, then I'm probably going to be pulling back from this. Notice your breath, your body. And this last sentence is also something that we would say as an adult to other adults. This relationship is really important to me and I don't want it to end. And what can we do to work together to make this more nurturing, more satisfying, so that I don't feel that I have to defend myself with you? And of course, when we're working with somebody and their nervous system, lots of times people are going to get really defensive. They might go into a fight response and make it all about us. There's lots of different ways that this might roll out. But right now, we're just working with what does that feel like inside of me when I consider what I might want to say and then actually imagining that I'm saying it. And let's return to this open-heartedness and this acknowledgement. Nervous system regulation is difficult. It takes time. We practice it. We learn these tools. And we have a lot of reasons why we stay in relationship with people who have dysregulated nervous systems, including ourselves at times. This isn't something that we're looking for perfection. We're really acknowledging this is hard. And can I keep my heart open? Can I stay on my own side? Really just kind of sense into maybe you wanted to put your hands on your heart or take a few more deep cyclic sighing breaths or stand up, move around or look around. Let yourself get regulated again and take a moment to think back through the last 20 minutes. What was coming up for you? Were you able to stay focused? Was it really activating in your nervous system to think about saying some of those things? These are hard things to do. And could we be soft and kind with ourselves?